All right, let's talk about Outer Worlds 2, because after spending about 30 hours in Obsidian's latest spacefaring RPG adventure, I've got some thoughts, and look, I'll be straight with you guys from the jump. This game surprised me, not because they reinvented the wheel or anything like that, but because Obsidian took everything that worked about the first game, cranked it up, and somehow made corporate dystopia in space feel fresh again in 2025. So buckle up, grab your favorite energy drink, and let's dive into why Outer Worlds 2 might be just the RPG you've been waiting for. You know how sequels usually go one of either two ways. Either they play it super safe and basically give you the same game with a fresh coat of paint, or they try to reinvent everything and lose what made the original game special. The Outer Worlds 2 does neither. Instead, Obsidian looked at their 2019 space RPG, acknowledged what worked and what didn't, and then methodically improved almost every single system while keeping that signature satirical charm intact. And let's be honest, after playing through so many RPGs that feel like they're just checking boxes, I actually think Outer Worlds 2 feel like they have something to say. Let me set the stage here. You're not continuing the story from the first game. This is a standalone sequel set in Arcadia system, not in Halcyon. You play as the commander, Earth agent, who basically is a space cop with a badge, a gun, and eventually your own ship called the Incognito. Right off the bat, the game establishes that you're somebody with authority, which is a nice change from the usual frozen colonists who just woke up trope. Your mission goes sideways in spectacular fashion because of course it does, and suddenly you're dealing with fictional warfare, corporate takeovers, and all these mysterious rifts in time that are cutting the colony from Earth. It's a strong setup that immediately gives you purpose and momentum. What really grabbed me about the opening hours is how Obsidian doesn't waste your time with endless exposition. Sure, there's world buildings and lore if you want to dig into a computer terminals and audio logs, sure, but the game actually trusts you to pick things up as you go. Within the first 2 hours, you got your ship, you got your recruiting companions, and you're making decisions that actually matter. The pacing here is just a chef kiss. It respects your time while still giving you the room to explore and experiment. Speaking of exploration, let's talk about the actual gameplay loop, because this is where the Outer Worlds 2 really shines. The moment-to-moment gameplay feels so much better than the first game. Remember how shooting in the original Outer Worlds felt kind of floaty and unsatisfying? Yeah, they fixed that. Weapons now have real weight and impact. When you're firing a plasma rifle, it feels like you're shooting superheated death, not just numbers at a health bar. The variety here is insane too. We're talking 10 different ammo types, each one with their own strategic uses. You got the Xenarian weapons that actually deal radioactive damage, but might overcharge mechanical enemies. Triple barrel shotguns that deliver the satisfying 1-2-3 punch rhythm. Energy weapons that feel completely different from the ballistic ones. I found myself constantly switching out loadouts just because I wanted to try everything. The combat improvements extend beyond just how the gun feels. Enemy AI is legitimately challenging now. These aren't just bullet sponges waiting to die. They use cover, they flank you when wounded. Human enemies will call for reinforcements. Mechs will try to overwhelm you with their numbers, and alien creatures have attack patterns that you need to learn. But because the combat demands actual tactics and positioning, what was really cool, the combat is just one option. The Outer Worlds 2 is at its best when you're using all tools at your disposal. The dialogue system is phenomenal, and I mean that. You can talk your way out of the boss fights completely. There's this one encounter with a faction leader where if you've done enough investigating and have enough speech skills, you can completely flip the script on them and turn their own subordinates against them without firing a single shot. These aren't just skip the buttons either. The dialogue confrontations have their own tension and drama. Sometimes talking your way out of a situation feels more satisfying than a shootout could be. The character building system deserves its own deep dive because it's incredibly flexible without being overwhelming. You get 2 skill points per level to distribute across various categories, like range weapons, dialogue, tech skills, leadership, and stealth. But here's the thing, you can't max out everything. The game forces you to make choices about what kind of character you want to be. Want to be a smooth talking gunslinger? You can definitely do that, but you won't be able to hack every terminal or pick every lock. Want to be a tech specialist who can reprogram robots and craft the best mods? Cool, go for it, but you might struggle in straight up gunfight. Every 2 levels, you get a perk point that adds these specialized bonuses. These perks build on each other in really interesting ways. Like there's this mediator perk that requires high speech skill, but it actually is a combat ability that frightens weaker enemies when you hurt them. Then there's the second perk called the Grim Vestige that builds on the intimidator to frighten surrounding enemies too. It creates these cool synergies where your dialogue skills can actually influence combats and vice versa. But the real star of the character system is the flaws. God, I love this system. As you play the game, it watches how you play and offers optional flaws based on your behavior. Get hit by plasma too much? The game might offer you a plasma weakness flaw. consistently reloading your weapons even though it's nearly full of magazines. There's an overprepared flaw that gives you bigger magazines but damage you if you ever let them run out empty. These aren't just penalties, they're trade-offs that actually enhance your playstyle if you're smart about it. The game even offered me a compulsive liar flaw after I lied too much in dialogue, which would have made the automatically select lies in every conversation. I actually passed on that one because I wanted control over my own deception. Your companions aren't just pack mules this time either. Each one has their own companion ability that you can activate in combat, and every 5 levels they get a choice between 2 perks that shape their combat roles. Niles, for example, can either become a tank that draws enemy fire or a damage dealer with increased firepower. Each companion also has passive abilities. Niles acts as a mobile workbench so you can craft ammo and mods in the field, while another companion might boost your intimidation or give you discounts at vendors. The companion quests are where these characters really shine though. My favorite was Marisol, this gray and black op agent who used to work for one of the major factions. Her questline is basically a spy thriller set against a sci-fi backdrop, complete with double agents, secret facilities, and moral ambiguity. These aren't just fetch quests either. They're fully voiced, multi-part stories that flesh out the world and give you meaningful choices that affect both the companion and the broader narrative. Let's talk about that broader narrative for a moment, because Outer World 2 has things to say. The satire here isn't subtle at all. Think more Mad Magazine than The New Yorker. It lands with surprising effectiveness. The main protagonist is Auntie's Choice, a mega corporation formed between a merger between Aunt CEO and the Space Choice from the first game. They represent this obsessive sort of religious devotion to unchecked capitalism, and while none of it is specific enough to call out Obsidian's parent company, Microsoft, directly, it works on a broader critique of our current movement. On the flip side, equally obsessed but devoted to pure science and knowledge, they believe they can unlock the secrets of existence and rule everything through perfect mathematical precision. They're portrayed as more humanitarianism, but cold and unfeeling. The game these two ideologies against each other and lets you navigate between them, choosing sides or playing them against each other as you see fit. The writing walks this interesting line between dark comedy and genius insight. There's this quest where you help a middle manager deal with workplace complaints, and it starts off funny but gradually reveals the crushing weight of being stuck between uncaring executives and desperate workers, something I truly feel on a deeper level. Another quest has you investigating a series of workplace incidents that are clearly murders, and the corporate doublespeak everyone uses to avoid acknowledging the reality is both hilarious and deeply unsettling. What impressed me most is how the game creates opportunities for genuine roleplay. I started my character as a trigger-happy idiot in the veins of Futurama Zap Brannigan, high charisma, good with guns, terrible at decision-making. But as the story progressed, I found myself making different choices, not because the game forced me to, but because the game presented genuine dilemmas that made me reconsider my approach. By the end, my commander had evolved from an overconfident fool into someone who had learned to trust their crew and think before acting. That kind of emergent character development is rare in RPG. The quest design deserves special recognition because how seamlessly side content weaves into the main story. Some side quests aren't just random tasks. They provide context and information that colors your understanding of the major players and the factions. The comic book collection quest that seems like mindless busy work, the comic you find contains propaganda that reveals how each faction sees itself and its enemies. The quest to help a small settlement with their water supply directly impacts how major faction views you and open up new dialogue options in a later main quest. This interconnectedness extends to how the game reacts to your choices. The reactivity here is next level. Killing a faction leader early on, their subordinate takes over and remember what you did. Help a corporation maximize profits in one area, workers in another area suffer and blame you for it. Even small decisions ripper outward in unexpected ways. There's a moment where a character that I helped earlier showed up to vouch for me in an intense negotiation, and I didn't even realize the game was tracking that relationship. Now let's address some rougher edges, because the Outer World isn't perfect. The first half of the game can feel slow, especially if you're not immediately grabbed by the factional politics. It takes a while for the main mystery about the rifts to really get going, and until then, you're mostly just doing tasks for various groups to build reputation. It picks up significantly around midpoint, but those first 10 hours might test some players' patience. Traveling can be a pain in the ass too. There's no fast travel between planets, and times on the Xbox Series X where I played were longer than I liked for bigger areas. You'll spend a lot of time sprinting from point A to point B, and the waypoint system isn't always clear about how to reach your destination. I got turned around more than once trying to navigate some of the more complex areas, especially the multi-level space stations. The computer terminals scattered throughout the world are a double-edged sword as well. On one hand, they contain tons of world building and story details that are fresh out of the setting. On the other hand, they're often written in dense corporate speak or scientific jargon that brings the pace to a screeching. Of course, corporate bureaucracy would involve endless email chains and reports, but reading through them, it can be a bit boring. Stealth feels underdeveloped compared to other systems. While you can sneak through some areas and there's gadgets that dissolves bodies for stealth kills, the stealth mechanics never feel as resigned as combat or dialogue. Enemy detection is inconsistent and there aren't enough stealth-specific perks or ability to make it feel viable. It works as a situational tool, but not as the main approach. The visual presentation is solid, but not spectacular. The art style leans into bright, saturated colors that give everything a slightly cartoonish feel. Some players might miss the more grittier aesthetic of Fallout or other post-apocalyptic games, but I think the vibrant palette fits the satirical tone. Character models and animations are serviceable, though facial animations during dialogue can be a bit stiff. The environments are the real star here, from the tropical beaches to industrial hellscapes to gleaming corporate offices. Each area has its own distinct personality. The audio design is mostly excellent. Weapons sound punchy and distinct. The voice acting is consistently strong across the board, and the ambient soundscapes really sell each environment. The soundtrack itself is a bit sparse though. There were some long stretches where I was listening to environmental noises and gunfire. The radio stations help fill this gap with genuinely funny commercials, propaganda songs, and some jazzy tunes that'll scratch that Fallout itch, but I wish the actual score was a bit more because the quest wouldn't progress. These were rare enough not to seriously impact my experience, but enough that they're worth mentioning. One thing that really stands out is how the Outer Worlds 2 handles player choice in the endgame. Without spoiling anything, the final accounts for so many variables based on your playthrough: which factions you supported, which campaigns survived, and whether they trust you, how you handle certain key quests. It all comes together in a final sequence that feels personalized. The ending I got felt like a natural conclusion to my specific journey, not just one of 3 predetermined outcomes. The game also does something interesting with New Game Plus. Basically, certain choices, discoveries from your first playthrough carry forward in unexpected ways, encouraging you to try different approaches to see how things change. It's not just higher difficulty in your gear, these are narrative changes based on what you learned before. Let me talk about value for a second, because this one's important right here. The Outer Worlds 2 is a solid 25 to 30 hour experience if you do most of the side content, maybe 40 if you're a completionist who reads every terminal and explores every corner. In an age where some RPGs feel bloated at 100+ hours, the Outer Worlds feels focused and purposeful. Every quest has a reason to exist, every area has something interesting to find, and when the credits roll, you feel satisfied rather than exhausted. Comparing it to recent RPGs, the Outer Worlds occupies this interesting middle ground. It doesn't have this massive scope of something like Starfield or Gate, but it's more focused and polished than many double RPGs. It reminds me of those mid-2000 RPGs that knew exactly what they wanted to be and executed that vision without trying to be everything to everyone. In a gaming landscape dominated by massive open worlds and games as a service model, the world feels refreshingly complete and confident. The multiplayer question always comes up with games like this, and no, there's no multiplayer or co-op. This is a purely single player experience and is better for it. Every system is designed around one player making choices and living with the consequences. Adding multiplayer would just dilute that focus, and I'm glad Obsidian didn't try to shoehorn it in. So who is the Outer Worlds 2 for? If you enjoyed the first game, this is an easy recommendation. It's basically that, but better in every way. If you're a fan of Obsidian's other work like Fallout New Vegas or Pillars of Eternity, you'll find a lot to love here. If you want an RPG that respects your intelligence and your time while still giving you meaningful choices, this is your game. If you're looking for cutting-edge graphics or revolutionary gameplay innovations, you might be a little disappointed. This is an iteration and a refinement, not a revolution. What Worlds 2 does best is create a space where player choices actually matters. Not just big dramatic moments, but an accumulation of small decisions that shape your journey. It's an RPG that remembers what you do and responds accordingly. That lets you approach problems from multiple angles and trusts you to find your own within the systems. The combat is vastly improved, the writing is sharp and funny, the companions are very memorable, and the whole package just worked. Is it perfect? No. The pacing issues in the first half and the sometimes cumbersome travel and the text in the terminals hold it back from greatness. But when I think about my time with the Outer Worlds, those complaints into the background. What I remember is talking my way past a boss and turning their own philosophy against them. I remember Marisol's loyalty mission revealing a conspiracy that reconstitutionalized early events. I remember the games offered me a flaw because it noticed I kept jumping off high places and taking damage. I remember my choices mattering in big and small ways. The Outer Worlds might not revolutionize the RPG genre, but it does something equally valuable. It deserves a polished, focused, and gently reactive role-playing experience that respects both your time and your intelligence. In an industry that's increasingly dominated by live service and endless content, Obsidian has crafted something completely confident and very compelling. It's not just a good sequel, it's proof that there's still room for scale single-player RPGs that do something really well, rather than just trying to be everything all at the same time. After 30 hours in Arcadia dealing with the corporate overlords and the scientific zealots, making friends and enemies, and slowly transforming from an overconfident fool into someone resembling a competent leader, I can confidently say that The Outer Worlds 2 is exactly that type of RPG we just need more of. It's not trying to be your favorite game or consume 100 hours of your life. It just wants to tell you an interesting story and give you managing ways to interact with it and leaves you satisfied when it's over with. It's an excellent RPG that improves on its predecessor in almost every way. It got heart, humor, and enough player agency to make multiple playthroughs worthwhile. If you're an RPG fan with Game Pass, this is a no-brainer. If you're buying it outright, it's still worth your money if you value quality over quantity. Obsidian has refined the formula here into something very special. It's not perfect, but it's definitely memorable. Anyway, that's my take on The Outer Worlds 2. If you enjoyed this review and want to catch more gaming content, come check me out on Twitch where I game live. Link is in the description. Until then, stay safe, stay smart, and stay alpha.